On this episode of Geek Dad Life, we're going to review the new Masters of the Universe Origins Teela figure by Mattel. Hey everybody, and welcome to Geek Dad Life. It's your host, Jay Glatfelter here. The new Masters of the Universe Origins line by Mattel is supposed to start hitting Walmarts the first week in August. But that hasn't stopped online orders from sending them sooner, as well as some store shelves already featuring all the figures from this first wave. We have already reviewed the He-Man and Skeletor figures on this channel, as well as the first beast in this line, Battle Cat. Today I am excited to review one of the first female figures from this line, and that is the heroic goddess warrior herself, Teela. As a fan of the mini comics, Teela is one of my favorite characters from the Masters of the Universe mythology. From the first ever issue of a mini comic, He-Man and the Power Sword, featuring a blonde Teela as well as the green version of the goddess, which had a masterful release in the Masters of the Universe Classics line, to the tale of Teela, the great mini comic story that explained why Teela, who was a heroic warrior for the Royal Guard, also had armor that made her look just like the goddess. She was two characters in one or two halves of the same coin, and it was one of the best stories from the original mini comics line. While the goddess was eventually honed and retconned into the sorceress, I love the fact that this Motu Origins line is going right back to what made Teela special in the original 8-back release. She is still a heroic warrior goddess with both the snake armor as well as being able to take off that snake armor and being a part of the Royal Guard led by Man-at-Arms. This Teela figure is packaged identical to the original Teela figure with that snake headdress attached with the snake staff and shield wrapped behind the figure. You can also see that she comes with the same mini comic that He-Man and Skeletor came with, the Beast Barrage. While I love the fact that we're getting mini comics with these figures, I wish we would have had maybe 3 or 4 just like the original 8-back figures came with. The front of Teela's card back is nearly identical to the He-Man and Skeletor release, with the new for 2020 in the top left-hand corner, 6+ in the right, as well as the modern posing retro play burst right above the bubble. Turning the card around, you see some fantastic artwork featuring Teela wearing her goddess snake headdress, knocking back Merman, while He-Man, King Randor, and Queen Marlena look on. Just like every other figure so far, we see cross-cell artwork for the Heroic Warriors and Evil Warriors, as well as 2 callouts to how you can fit the magical staff into hand and being able to twist this figure into powerful battle positions. Out of the box, this figure has the same amount of articulation as the He-Man and Skeletor figures with 16. But unfortunately, it looks like I had a QC factory error with my right elbow joint. The cut joint that allows the forearm to move up and down is fused solid. A big bummer that I assume is a one-off QC problem, not a broader problem for all of the Teela figures. But given how many fun poses the He-Man and Skeletor figure have been able to get into, it is a bummer that my Teela is not going to be able to do that. So I will definitely have to try and find another one of these that doesn't have the fused elbow and forearm joint. The Teela figure is definitely shorter than all of the Origins figures so far. Where the He-Man and Skeletor were taller than their vintage counterparts, I actually think this Teela is a smidge shorter than the vintage Teela figure. Both the Origins and vintage Teela come in right at that 5.5-inch mark, with the vintage Teela actually being slightly taller than the vintage He-Man figure. But again, most of the male figures from the line were sculpted in that squatting position. When bringing in Skeletor, you can see how much taller he is compared to the Teela figure. That doesn't bother me so much, as I really hope this female body type will be able to stand a lot better than the original female figures in the Masters of the Universe line. It might be a byproduct of those rubber hip joints, but gosh, they are darn near impossible to stand, and you would maybe think it's something to do with the vintage ones, but even the Super 7 female figures like She-Ra are impossible to keep standing. I'm happy to say that generally it is better. It is not perfect, but I love that the Motu Origins figures also have foot peg holes in the bottom of their feet that are the same size as a lot of the Hasbro Black Series figures, which is also about the same size as the classic Kenner figures. So that does give you a wide range of figure stands to choose from. But since these are 5.5-inch scale figures, you're definitely going to want a wider base. Looking at the sculpt of the figure, I think they've done a fantastic job. I absolutely love the head sculpt of this Teela figure. It's part great sculpt and part fantastic paint applications that really show a lot of her personality, even though it's in a bit of a passive pose. But really, you can see a lot of the fire, the grit, the power that comes from Teela and her position in the Royal Guard. Really dig the head sculpt here. The rest of the figure is pretty straightforward. The joints are pretty good. I like how they did the knee joints here. They aren't too obtrusive. They don't look too wonky, which can be the case sometimes when you have a bare-skinned joint. The only gripe I can have is that the neck collar kind of makes her neck look thicker than it is. Maybe a deeper cut for the neck in this sculpt would have pronounced the neck more instead of making it kind of flat with the neck collar. Not a deal breaker by any stretch, but still maybe something to improve on in future releases. The paint applications are fairly simple here outside of that amazing head sculpt. I do wish that the ornamentation on her dress had the same gold paint that the vintage figure had. Going side by side with that vintage, you can see how much more the vintage paint pops. There's also a little bit of slop here and there. I actually had some slop on my left forearm. But again, the paint applications on the face are so fantastic that I can overlook some of the sloppiness on the rest of the figure. Teela comes with the same accessories that the vintage counterpart comes with. You have her small shield, her magical snake staff, and her goddess snake headdress. What I like about the headdress is that it's a much softer plastic, almost rubber compared to the vintage counterpart and even the Masters of the Universe classics. And what that allows this Teela figure to do is when you're posing her head, looking in different directions with the headdress on, the headdress kind of moves with her and you're able to get more of a dynamic pose when you're displaying her with the goddess snake headdress. Now, I generally prefer to display my Teela without that headdress. I really hope that we can get a green goddess figure, and that is generally how I would prefer to display the Teela mold with the goddess snake headdress. Outside of its more rubbery construction, I also love that the back of the headdress actually has some more snake detail, which is pretty cool. The vintage one does not have that. The shield is also a different design since this Teela actually has a more functional hand versus the original. It actually has a little handle that will hold the shield as opposed to clip on her forearm. I actually like the vintage snake staff better. The new one is a bit thicker, which I assume is so that it's held in the hand better. But the snake on top of the staff is a lot softer, kind of thicker, almost like an engorged snake. So it does not come across as cool as the vintage staff as well as the classic staff. Going side by side with the original Teela, this figure, much like the He-Man and Skeletor, matches that burst saying that we are getting retro play with modern posing, meaning that it captures everything that you would love about the original figure while giving you more articulation points and more modern sculpting. I'm going to grade this figure slightly less than the He-Man and Skeletor figure in that I had the QC problem with the right forearm elbow joint. It has severely limited my ability to pose with this figure, and I'm definitely going to need to get another one to rectify this issue. Hopefully this is a one-off issue and most of the Teela figures will not have this problem. And hopefully as these start to hit Walmart retailers across the country, it should be easy to return, exchange this figure for a fully working one. My personal QC issues aside, this is still going to get the Geek Dad Life buy rating. The head sculpt is fantastic. The posing that you can get with this modern articulation allows you to truly stand and get a Teela figure into some warrior battle positions that the vintage figure was never able to do. That has me excited to get the PowerCon exclusive She-Ra figure, as well as the other female figure from this first wave, Evil-Lyn. Definitely check out my other Masters of the Universe Origins reviews. I have reviewed He-Man and Skeletor, as well as Battle Cat, and later this week I will be reviewing the new Evil-Lyn figure. I plan on reviewing most, if not all, of the Masters of the Universe Origins toy line, so be sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and click on that bell icon to be notified when the latest episode drops. Until then, hasta luego and goodbye.